They delivered unforgettable performances on screen. But behind the camera, the cast of The Fifth Element was navigating emotional turns, hidden tensions, and once-in-a-lifetime experiences they rarely talk about. From last-minute casting pivots to secret languages shared between lovers, their real stories were as surreal as the film's futuristic setting. These aren't just production notes, these are deeply personal moments the cast carried with them, long after the cameras stopped rolling. This is the side of The Fifth Element you've never seen, the secrets they kept hidden until now. Luke's escape became their world. Long before the flying taxis and intergalactic chaos made it to the big screen, a young dreamer was building a world no one else could see. Luc Besson wasn't born into cinema royalty or raised on film sets. He was a solitary teenager in a quiet part of France. For him, storytelling began as a form of survival. At just 16, he started sketching out a strange universe filled with alien races, mystical forces, and one extraordinary woman named Lilu. It wasn't a script yet, it was a private refuge. This wasn't about fame or recognition, it was about building a place to disappear into. A place where loneliness had structure and imagination was the only rule. In many ways, the earliest version of The Fifth Element wasn't a screenplay at all. It was a personal lifeboat floating in the space between childhood and adulthood. That personal space eventually became The Fifth Element. But what makes the story remarkable isn't just that it took 2 decades to bring to life, it's that the cast was stepping into a world born of isolation, yearning, and a desperate need for escape. Every set, every prop, every character had roots in that boy's inner world. When the actors arrived, many didn't know they were walking into something so emotionally charged. This wasn't just science fiction. It was a living dream crafted by someone who needed it to exist. Bruce Willis, Milla Jovovich, and the rest of the cast weren't just playing roles. They were embodying parts of Besson's younger self, helping him tell the story he'd been waiting to share his entire life. The result is a film that feels larger than life, but also oddly intimate, because behind the high-speed chases and neon explosions lies something simple. A young man writing his way into another world, and a cast that helped him bring it home. And in doing so, they weren't just making a movie, they were helping someone finish a journey that had started long before any of them arrived. Milla didn't audition, she arrived. The search for Lilu was massive. Over 8,000 actresses were seen, each hoping to embody a character who was more than just human. Casting directors saw it all, trained movements, rehearsed alien dialects, practiced mystery. It became a parade of ambition, with candidates trying hard to feel like the future. And then, someone walked in and didn't try at all. Milla Jovovich didn't light up the room with dramatic flair. She didn't command attention with a booming voice or technical performance. Instead, her quiet confidence unsettled the routine. She didn't feel like she was from here, here. Luc Besson later said she looked like she belonged to another world entirely. That was the moment he knew. What Milla brought was more than presence. It was mystery. Her features, her voice, her stillness. They didn't anchor her to any single identity. She floated in between categories, between cultures, between expectations. For a story built on elemental forces and ancient mysteries, that made her perfect. Other actresses, like Elizabeth Berkley, gave strong, even daring auditions. But something about them felt constructed. They were performing Lilu. Milla didn't have to perform, she just was. That subtle distinction made all the difference. She didn't demand the spotlight, yet somehow became its source. Lilu's role wasn't just physical, it was spiritual. The character had to carry the weight of a forgotten language, the purity of an ancient force, and the fragility of something freshly reborn. Milla could do that with a single glance. She wasn't trying to be powerful. She simply was. Casting her wasn't a calculated move, it was instinct. In a film overflowing with color, chaos, and noise, she became its silent center. And from that moment on, no matter how bizarre the scene or how explosive the setting, she was the gravity. Everything else orbited around. Bruce wasn't the first choice. It's hard to imagine The Fifth Element without that dry wit and reluctant charm behind the wheel of the flying cab. But Corbin Dallas was almost a completely different character, grittier, broodier, and far less amused by the chaos around him. Before Bruce Willis stepped into the role, the studio had their eyes on another global icon, Mel Gibson. At the time, Gibson was riding high off the success of Braveheart. He was a box office juggernaut, known for emotionally intense performances and undeniable screen presence. From a marketing perspective, he made perfect sense. But Luc Besson had a different vision. He wasn't just casting a hero, he was casting tone, rhythm, even contradiction. And something about Gibson's energy felt too heavy for the world he was building. Corbin Dallas needed to be exhausted and heroic, but also quick with a joke, light on his feet, and entirely human amid the absurdity. Besson didn't want a tragic warrior. He wanted someone who could be tossed into a neon war zone and still look like a guy just trying to get through the day. That person, he believed, was Bruce Willis. When Bruce came on board, the film's pulse shifted. He brought an everyday man quality to a role that could have easily veered into melodrama. His smirk softened the stakes. His sarcasm gave the film its grounding. Where Gibson might have leaned into darkness, Bruce leaned into the absurd. And that's what The Fifth Element needed to fly. This casting change didn't just alter one character, it reshaped the emotional texture of the entire movie. With Willis, Corbin wasn't just a hero. He was the audience's lifeline in a world that made no sense. And by not taking himself too seriously, he allowed viewers to surrender to the madness without getting lost in it. Sometimes the best casting choice isn't the most obvious one. It's the one that keeps the world spinning even as it falls apart. And that's what Bruce did. He didn't just star in the film, he held it together. Gary Oldman hated the film. Audiences still talk about the half-plastic helmet, the southern twang, and the absurd mix of menace and flair. Zorg, the flamboyant villain of The Fifth Element, became one of the most bizarre and unforgettable characters in sci-fi. But the actor behind the role had an entirely different take, one he didn't hide after the cameras stopped rolling. Gary Oldman didn't seek out the role of Jean-Baptiste Emmanuel Zorg. He didn't fall in love with the script or chase the opportunity. He took the job as a favor. Years earlier, Luc Besson had backed Oldman's gritty passion project, Kneel by Mouth, helping him secure financing and support. When Besson called about The Fifth Element, Oldman said yes without reading the script closely because he felt he owed him. The decision led to one of the most memorable performances of Oldman's career. But to this day, he admits he had no idea what the movie was even about. He's joked that he still doesn't. While fans were mesmerized by his surreal villainy, he was simply doing the job and following direction. What makes this even stranger is how effective he was. Zorg became iconic, a villain equal parts terrifying and ridiculous. His look, his tone, the way he barked orders and rambled about chaos with wild-eyed confusion, it all worked. But it worked despite Oldman's indifference. Or perhaps because of it. He approached the role like an experiment. He pulled inspiration from cartoon villains, eccentric oil tycoons, and even elements of political satire. What emerged was something grotesque but magnetic. A villain that didn't fit any mold. While many actors lose themselves in a role, Oldman seemed to stand beside it, twisting it into shape with a wink and a growl. It's rare to see a disconnect between creator and performer lead to something so strangely perfect. But that tension, the distance between belief and performance, may be what gave Zorg his weird, unforgettable edge. Gary Oldman may have hated the movie, but audiences never stopped loving what he brought to it. Prince walked away from Ruby. The energy of Ruby Rhod is almost impossible to describe. Equal parts rock star, fashion explosion, and comedic lightning bolt. But that energy was originally imagined for someone else entirely. Before Chris Tucker ever stepped on set, the role of Ruby was written with a single name in mind: Prince. Luc Besson didn't just want Prince, he designed Ruby around him. The gender-defying style, the theatrical flair, the extravagant voice. It all mirrored Prince's real-life presence. And Prince was intrigued. He read the script. He even agreed to meet with Besson and fashion legend Jean-Paul Gaultier. At first, everything seemed like a perfect match. Then came the costumes. Gaultier had gone all in. Lace, mesh, floral embroidery, and high-heeled boots that defied physics. The wardrobe wasn't just bold, it was otherworldly, with silhouettes that screamed louder than Ruby ever could. And somehow, it was too much even for Prince. The man who had performed in heels, sequins, and layered silk for decades looked at the sketches and reportedly balked. "Too feminine," he said, and just like that, he stepped away. It left a hole in the production, one filled by a very different force of nature. Chris Tucker, fresh from Friday and Money Talks, brought youth, electricity, and unpredictability. His Ruby wasn't seductive like Prince. He was unfiltered, explosive, almost alien in his own way. Tucker channeled influences from Michael Jackson's moves to Prince's rhythm, but the final result was pure chaos wrapped in glitter. And it worked. Ruby became unforgettable, not despite the casting change, but because of it. While fans still wonder what a Prince version of Ruby would have looked like, Tucker's performance carved its own path. He made the role his own by refusing to imitate. He leaned into the absurdity and pushed it even further. There's a strange beauty in what almost happened. In a film filled with what-ifs, Ruby Rhod stands as a reminder that sometimes losing the original plan leads to something no one could have predicted, but everyone remembers. The Diva was his wife. Beneath layers of blue skin, shimmering latex, and haunting vocals stood someone with a deeper connection to the film than most realized. The character of Diva Plavalaguna, ethereal, alien, and key to unlocking the film's emotional crescendo, wasn't played by a stranger to the director. She was played by Luc Besson's wife. Her name was Maiwen and Mila, a French actress and filmmaker in her own right. She brought elegance and intensity to the role, even with her face largely hidden behind prosthetics. Though her screen time was brief, her presence was unforgettable. The Diva's performance, with its operatic power and surreal stillness, became one of the most iconic moments in The Fifth Element. But behind the scenes, a quieter and far more personal drama was playing out. During the filming of this very sequence, Besson's attention was quietly shifting, from his wife to the film's breakout star, Milla Jovovich. What began as director and actress collaborating on Lilu's unique voice and movement turned into something more. Late-night language rehearsals and long hours on set became emotional connection. By the time filming wrapped, Besson and Maiwen had separated, and his relationship with Milla had become public. There was no media scandal, no tabloid frenzy, just a subtle change in orbit. One woman helped build the mythology of the film, the other embodied its soul, and in the final cut, they share the screen in different forms. One as the voice that unlocks the fifth element, the other as the element itself. For Maiwen, the performance was more than a role. It was a farewell cloaked in blue. For Mila, it was a beginning, both as an actress and as someone stepping into the center of Besson's creative universe. The Diva's aria now feels layered with more than music. It holds heartbreak, transition, and a strange kind of symmetry. Sometimes what we see on screen reflects more than fiction. In this case, two luminous women helped carry a film's emotional weight, one as a fading echo and one as its rising flame. They spoke in a secret language. Among the most memorable elements of The Fifth Element is a language no one had ever heard before, fluid, sharp, and almost musical. Lilu's divine language wasn't just a set of random sounds. It was a fully constructed linguistic system, carefully designed by Luc Besson long before cameras rolled. But what started as world-building quickly became something far more personal. The language was created to reflect Lilu's alien origin, a way to communicate emotion, intention, and complexity without leaning on any known dialect. Besson wrote over 400 distinct words into it, each one serving a purpose in the lore of the universe. But once Milla Jovovich was cast, she didn't just memorize it, she breathed life into it. Together, Besson and Jovovich refined the language throughout production. They didn't treat it as gibberish to fill scenes. They treated it like a bridge between character and actress, a rhythm that made Lilu feel real. And somewhere along the way, that language stopped belonging only to the film. As their off-screen relationship developed, the two began using the divine language privately, passing notes, whispering phrases, even joking in a tongue only they understood. It became their secret code, written in the margins of scripts, spoken during quiet moments, and left unreadable to everyone else on set. For Milla, it wasn't just about performance, it was about connection. The effort she put into mastering this language wasn't technical, it was intimate. She wasn't just learning lines, She was learning how to speak directly to the man directing her in a voice only they could share. The romance between them wouldn't last, but the language did. Every syllable spoken in the film is part of that shared world, crafted with affection, layered with subtext, and delivered with a kind of fluency few actors ever get to explore. It's not just part of the character, it's part of their story. In a film filled with explosions and spectacle, some of its most personal truths were whispered in a made-up language no one else could translate. The costume that nearly broke Chris. Outrageous doesn't begin to describe Ruby Rod's wardrobe. The leopard print bodysuit, the towering collar, the glittering cane, it was a fashion statement from another dimension. But what looked like effortless eccentricity on screen was, in reality, one of the most physically punishing costumes ever worn on a movie set. Designed by Jean-Paul Gaultier, the outfit was a masterpiece of bold choices and unfiltered creativity. But for Chris Tucker, wearing it was like stepping into a cage made of fabric and glue. The costume weighed over 50 pounds and included a rigid spine that wrapped tightly around his torso. It didn't breathe, it didn't bend, and it definitely didn't allow him to sit. Between takes, while other cast members could retreat to chairs or trailers for a moment of rest, Tucker had no such luxury. He leaned against walls, stood in corners, and often stayed upright for hours while drenched in sweat. Makeup artists and assistants hovered around him, with towels and fans just to keep him from overheating. Despite this, he never let the discomfort show on camera. His version of Ruby was wild, kinetic, unpredictable. He bounced from scene to scene with high-pitched shrieks and flamboyant flourishes. It looked like joy, but it came from sheer willpower and performance grit. The pain was real, but he buried it beneath the sparkle. The costume also restricted movement in subtle ways. Simple things like turning his head or bending an arm took effort. Yet Tucker used those limitations to create a character that was physically exaggerated, robotic in some ways, and hilariously larger than life. The suit didn't just clothe Ruby, it defined him. Behind all the chaos and comedy was an actor enduring one of the toughest wardrobe experiences imaginable. And yet, he gave one of the most iconic performances in the film. Sometimes the most liberating characters are born from the most limiting conditions. Chris Tucker didn't just wear the costume, he conquered it. Real flames, real danger. Few props in The Fifth Element are as unforgettable as Zorg's ZF-1 gun. Packed with absurd features, machine guns, net launchers, freeze rays, it was the embodiment of over-the-top sci-fi creativity. But what many viewers don't know is that one of those weapons was alarmingly real. The ZF-1 wasn't just a plastic prop filled with special effects. It had a functioning flamethrower. The flames that burst out of the barrel weren't added in post-production. They were real, hot, and incredibly dangerous. On set, every time Gary Oldman pulled that trigger, there was fire, actual fire, coming within inches of actors, cameras, and crew. During one rehearsal, things almost went catastrophically wrong. The flamethrower unexpectedly misfired while crew members were still nearby. Panic erupted. Safety teams rushed in. The set narrowly avoided a full-blown blaze. For a moment, it looked like the most explosive part of the film might not come from special effects, but from a literal accident. Why risk it? The production team, and Besson himself, were obsessed with blending practical effects and visual spectacle. There was a belief that audiences could sense when something was real, and that belief fueled some bold, sometimes reckless choices. The fire in Zorg's weapon symbolized the unpredictable power the character wielded, but it also symbolized the film's broader philosophy: embrace chaos to create wonder. The cast remembered the day vividly. For many, it was a wake-up call, a reminder that even in a whimsical sci-fi world, very real danger lingered just beyond the frame. When you play with fire, sometimes it plays back. That flamethrower moment now lives on as more than a behind-the-scenes anecdote. It's a testament to a production that constantly danced on the edge. The danger was never just part of the story, it was part of the process. Melting under the alien suits, brutish, snarling, and oddly hunched, the Mangalores brought menace and muscle to the Fifth Element's interstellar world. Their lumbering walk and twitchy movements added a strange realism to their alien presence. But behind those masks wasn't just acting, it was survival. The Mangalore suits were engineering feats, built to look otherworldly, but they came with a painful cost. Each one weighed nearly 80 pounds and was made from dense, unventilated materials. There were no cooling systems, no airflow, and certainly no comfort. Under hot set lights and hours of reshoots, the actors inside were trapped in personal furnaces. Their exaggerated body movements weren't always performance choices. Often, they were efforts to stay conscious, to shift just enough to keep from fainting. One actor reportedly collapsed mid-scene, unable to continue due to heat exhaustion. Others had to be helped out of the suits between takes, faces drenched in sweat, muscles shaking from strain. What looks on screen like eerie physicality, the way Mangalores tilt their heads or shift awkwardly, was often just the human body reacting to extreme stress. These weren't carefully choreographed motions. They were signs of endurance, filmed and framed to fit the film's alien aesthetic. Despite the suffering, the final shots were kept. No one wanted to reshoot unless absolutely necessary. The actors inside the suits didn't speak up much either. For them, getting through a scene without passing out was the silent badge of a job well done. It's a reminder that sometimes the most convincing special effects don't come from CGI. They come from real people, enduring real discomfort, hidden behind layers of foam and latex. The Mangalores were alien on the outside, but inside those sweltering suits were actors giving more than just a performance. They were giving everything they had. They blew up a real building. When the opera house goes up in flames during the Diva's unforgettable concert, the moment feels like pure cinematic spectacle. What many fans don't realize is that this wasn't achieved through computer graphics or miniatures. That explosion, it was completely real. The production team orchestrated what was, at the time, the largest indoor explosion ever filmed. There were no second chances, no room for error. The entire sequence had to be captured in a single take because the set, built full scale for this exact moment, would be obliterated in seconds. To make it work, the crew spent weeks meticulously rigging the structure with high-powered charges. Every camera angle had to be rehearsed in advance, every actor's position precisely calculated. When the moment came, nerves were high. Safety teams stood by, and the set fell completely silent before detonation. And then, ignition. The blast tore through the room in a roar of flame and debris. Walls collapsed, props splintered, and heat washed over everyone on set. For the cast, it wasn't just a scene. It was an adrenaline-pumping, heart-racing experience. Milla Jovovich later said she could feel the heat singe her skin as she ran through the smoke. There were no visual effects needed to sell the chaos. What you see on screen is what actually happened. Real destruction, captured with precision and timing. That level of commitment to practical effects is rare, especially in films that lean into science fiction and fantasy. The result was one of the most visually arresting moments in the movie, all built on the gamble of a one-shot deal. It's not just cinematic flair, it's a testament to how far Luc Besson and his team were willing to go to make The Fifth Element feel truly epic. They never shared a scene. It's hard to believe that in a movie where every character seems intertwined by destiny, two of its biggest stars never once appear together. Bruce Willis and Gary Oldman, playing the hero and the villain, respectively, never share a single frame in The Fifth Element. That's not an oversight. It was a deliberate choice by director Luc Besson. He envisioned Corbin Dallas and Jean-Baptiste Zorg as opposing forces that influenced the same world, but traveled completely separate orbits. Like magnets repelling each other, their impact is felt through ripple effects, not direct confrontation. For most of the film, each man is caught in his own struggle, Dallas trying to make sense of Lilu's arrival and his reluctant heroism, while Zorg plots destruction under the command of a greater, unseen evil. Their stories overlap, intertwine, and drive the plot forward, but they never physically meet. The audience never gets the classic face-off, the verbal sparring, the last-minute standoff, the cliched showdown of good versus evil. Instead, Besson opts for tension that simmers indirectly. Dallas and Zorg shape each other's journeys without ever acknowledging one another. It's a bold structural decision that subtly amplifies the film's theme of cosmic imbalance and destiny. Behind the scenes, this narrative gap meant Willis and Oldman didn't work together at all. In fact, Oldman later joked that he only did the movie as a favor to Besson and found it amusing that he never interacted with its lead actor. The two stars never built a bond on set, not out of rivalry, but because the story simply never required it. And yet, their performances feel connected. One is grounded, gritty, and reluctant. The other is flamboyant, chaotic, and strangely vulnerable. The absence of a shared scene doesn't dull their chemistry. It enhances the mystery of their parallel roles. Their separation reminds us that conflict doesn't always need contact. Sometimes, the most powerful forces shape each other from afar. Critics booed, fans cheered. When The Fifth Element premiered at the Cannes Film Festival in 1997, the reaction wasn't what the studio hoped for. As the credits rolled, boos echoed through the prestigious theater. Critics were quick to dismiss the film as chaotic, shallow, or overly indulgent, focusing on its eccentric visuals and quirky tone rather than its ambition. But outside the festival circuit, something entirely different was happening. Audiences embraced it. Word of mouth spread fast. Viewers weren't seeing a mess. They were seeing a bold, vibrant, one-of-a-kind experience. The visual world building, the outrageous costumes, the offbeat humor, and the emotional core of Lilu's story. All of it struck a chord with fans who were hungry for something different from typical sci-fi fare. While many critics at the time couldn't make sense of its tonal shifts and genre blending, everyday moviegoers leaned into its uniqueness. They didn't need it to follow the rules. In fact, the fact that it broke them made it even better. Over time, the film's reputation shifted. The Fifth Element didn't just gain a cult following. It became a staple of late-night cable, dorm room posters, and sci-fi convention screenings. Its once divisive style turned into an iconic aesthetic. Characters like Lilu and Zorg became instantly recognizable, and the film's blend of comedy, action, and emotion grew more respected with age. Even some early critics came around. Retrospectives praised its design, performances, and fearless direction. And those initial boos at Cannes, they've become part of the film's legacy, a reminder that innovation often faces resistance before recognition. Ultimately, it wasn't critics who decided the fate of The Fifth Element. It was the fans who saw past the noise and embraced its heart. They kept it alive, quoting its lines, celebrating its world, and proving that sometimes audiences know best. Multipass wasn't supposed to last. Sometimes the lines that stick aren't the ones you plan for. In The Fifth Element, few phrases are quoted more than Lilu's cheerful robotic declaration, multipass. But believe it or not, it was never meant to be a lasting catchphrase. During filming, the multipass exchange was just a small comedic beat, Lilu trying to blend in with the world around her, clinging to the one word she understood. It was funny, charming, and totally in character, but no one expected it to echo across generations of sci-fi fans. Milla Jovovich herself improvised how she repeated the word, playing off its awkwardness in a way that felt innocent and hilarious. Bruce Willis's deadpan reaction helped sell the moment, turning it into a perfect pairing of absurdity and affection. What was once a throwaway line took on a life of its own. Fans latched onto it at conventions, on forums, and in memes. They quoted it, wore it on t-shirts, and used it as a kind of shorthand for nerdy connection. Multipass wasn't just a funny word. It became a symbol of the film's charm, its offbeat energy, and the quirky relationship between Corbin and Lilu. The filmmakers never predicted this. It wasn't part of any marketing plan. There were no early posters with the phrase, no studio execs asking for merch tie-ins. The audience made it iconic. Their love for the moment turned it into a lasting part of pop culture. Over time, multipass even found its way into real-world tech discussions and online slang. It became the perfect reference for anything involving security badges, futuristic identification, or just sci-fi fandom. The word didn't just survive, it thrived. And that's the magic of The Fifth Element. It wasn't always about big explosions or special effects. Sometimes the film's biggest legacy lives in the tiniest, weirdest, most human details. Like a blue-haired alien clutching her ID and reminding us all, multipass. What began as a sci-fi spectacle filled with wild colors, strange creatures, and over-the-top action was, at its heart, a deeply personal journey for those who brought it to life. The Fifth Element may have looked like chaos on screen, but behind every outlandish costume and surreal set was a group of people navigating real transformations, emotional, professional, and creative. For many in the cast, this wasn't just another movie, it was a turning point. Some found unexpected stardom, others rediscovered lost passions. A few walked away changed in ways no one could have predicted. And through it all, the film left behind something powerful, an emotional residue that fans still feel today. Let us know in the comments what shocked you the most about what this cast endured. We've got more hidden cast stories coming soon, from the iconic to the forgotten, the cult favorites to the overlooked classics. Like this video and subscribe for more revelations behind the scenes. Because The Fifth Element was never about following the rules. It was about lighting a match and watching it burn. And for this cast, some of those flames never went out.